It's another episode of the Pack the Rock podcast. Today, it's me, Dylan Traeger, joined by Liv Clements, Sam Brunsman, and Riley Woodall. There's a lot to talk about today. Let's briefly go into the Akron, Indiana game and how much of a horrendous game that was. Who wants to start that off?
I can start it off. Yeah, that was just a hard game. Come on. You see 4 overtimes against one of the worst offensive teams in college football right now. That's just unacceptable. IU's not that great, right? Like, we're not putting them Ohio State level or Michigan level, but still, like, to take Akron to 4 overtimes, that's just unacceptable. And, IU fans barely stay for 3 quarters, so you have them stay for 4 overtimes. We deserve an apology.
And I want to jump in here and say it shouldn't have gone into overtime. Akron should have won that game. That's insane.
True. That's true.
Indiana's a Big Ten team, and you almost lose to Akron, a team that you should blow out. That should never happen. I got a couple things here. Akron outgained IU 474 to 282 in total yards, 211 to 190 pass, 263 to 92 on the ground. And they beat them like 10 minutes plus in time of possession. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
You also see, too, which I think is funny, is, like, you bring that up, and I think we've said IU's so predictable in the certain plays they use.
Yeah.
And you see it again. They run the play option every time. They love the play option every time, right? But then you see the defense is strong in the corner blitz. But, again, that's not surprising. We see that every time. I can write up a playbook. I can get them going. But, you see the same things every time. It doesn't matter if it's Akron or Ohio or Michigan or Penn State. The teams are going to know what to expect. And they know Taven's weak points at this point. Like, accuracy's hard with him, which is fine. You learn that from a young quarterback. But like you said, you throw an interception against Akron, and you're just kind of like, what's going on? Defense was still strong, but still had weak points. So, there's a lot to unpack there. It was just a hard game to watch.
Yeah, and what Riley was saying, IU almost gave up 500 yards against an Akron offense that is not very good. The whole team's not very good. They're one of the lower teams in the MAC. And, as a Big Ten team going up against a MAC team, I'm sure we all came into the game thinking, like, okay, IU's going to win this game by plenty of points. But then it goes into 4 overtimes. It looks like Akron should have won the game. They missed a field goal. And now here we are heading into the Maryland game with a lot of concerns with the offense. I think the defense looked pretty good, but now you're looking at the offense saying, hey, how can this offense go against a really stiff and tight Maryland defense on the road? So, we'll see what happens in a few days.
I think that, there were high points, though. You saw, like, Andre Carter and Aaron Casey. That was a strong defensive duo, and I feel like they really held that team together. And offensively, it wasn't the Jalen Lucas show. It wasn't. You really saw Donovan McCulley stepped up. You had Christian Turner in place of Josh Henderson. So I feel like there were some key moments where you saw some players start to get in a flow. You have E.J. Williams out right now, so that leaves room for more receivers to really get in there. But it really shows that when Jalen Lucas isn't really having the ideal game and Taven's trying to figure out who else he can go to, you see the blur and the gray in there for sure.
I think for me, you go to the Louisville game and it's like, sure, you give up 21 in the first half and you put up 0. That's not great, but they almost came back and won against a Louisville team that's, pretty good. Like, pretty good. So, you come out of that game and it's like, okay, there's some things we can build on and work upon. And then you go to the Akron week and it's like, okay, let's destroy them. You know what I mean? Right. Let's open up the playbook. Let's get Taven comfortable so that when he goes on the road against Maryland, he's more prepared and he's like more suited to take on a tougher competition. And then something like that happens. I would be borderline panic if I was a Hoosier fan coming into this week after what just happened against Akron last week.
It left me thinking going into the game that maybe we were over comfortable, and I felt that watching the game when the game started, there was no sense of urgency. I think the guys were settling for less than what they could play for, and I could tell the energy was not there. And me being an IU fan, I was kind of panicking at the first quarter because things were not looking good. And I was like, oh boy, this is going to be one of those games. And you could tell.
Yeah, and I think, too, what's important to mention is after the game, when they did press, Tom Allen said that was the worst performance so far this season offensively. but you also had a terrible game against OSU. And you lost against Louisville. And so I don't know if it's fair to really say that this was the worst offensive show. Because like then you see Taven, he takes it on his back, right? He's like, that's on me. The missed wide receivers being wide open, those drops. But I mean, it was those missed drops. It was, yes, Taven struggled, but I also think like as a team, they're still not flowing. Like you can just see there's miscommunication across the whole field. I mean, you saw Jalen Lucas was wide open for that play that could have won them early, right? And
my man was just standing there.
Just standing there. And you're just like, I mean, we're all kind of like, we're trying to throw it to him. Like, we're trying to help him out. And so, I mean, like, yes, Taven can take that on his back if he wants to. But as it's a team flow. I mean, they rep LEO, right? And I mean, that's their slogan is they're all in this together. And I feel like right now there's just not team camaraderie. I think going into Maryland, that's going to hurt them more if the team's not together. That's what I think.
I want to ask you this. What do you think the team needs to do to get back on track with the communication?
I mean, I think what's important is when you said they went in too confident, right? I think you can go into a game hoping you win and expecting to win. Mm-hmm. But when you automatically think like this is just gonna be a light practice, you're not gonna win. And that goes, I think, with coaching staff. If Allen's expressing to them like this is gonna be, a practice game before we go into Maryland, that's terrible communication off jump, right? And you have Taven, who's an early quarterback, whether he's playing a Big Ten game or not. You have to go into every game like, this has to be my perfect game. Because he doesn't have a perfect game, it automatically affects the whole team. So I think to build communication, it's just going to come down to understanding that we all understand we're underdogs. It's not one of us is above the other. Just because Jalen Lucas is having a great season, IU's not. So I think that's what's going to be important going forward.
Going to your point, it kind of everything kind of runs through the quarterback and how he plays. I mean, that's how football works. I mean, if the quarterback's having a bad game, it kind of reflects on how the team's going to play, because they want to see their quarterback shine. They want to see how good that he can do. And it's not just with the Indiana team; it's with every football team throughout college football, the NFL. But yeah, I mean, if Taven's having a bad game, I mean, he didn't have the greatest game against Akron. I think he went 11 for 26 with 1 touchdown, 1 interception.
You're right on.
And perfect. Yeah. So. I mean, as you said, he had a wide open Jalen Lucas on the right. If you're looking at that, I saw it on Twitter after the game. I mean, couldn't be more wide open. I mean, he's young. He still has a lot to grow as a sophomore coming in, transferred from Tennessee. So I think that it's just small steps right now with Taven. And I think that he'll get to where he wants to get with this team as a leader in a few weeks. Get it going in Big Ten play a little bit.
I was at the Lucas Oil game against Louisville, watching as a fan in the stands, which is nice. Oops, I just bumped my mic for those that are listening. And you used 2 timeouts early in the first quarter. That's not a player problem. That's a coaching problem.
Right.
And sure, like a lot of it is on the players, like you guys mentioned with the quarterback, with Taven, and some of the other players as well. But I think there's a certain point in time, like the coaching staff let those players down in that game, 100%. And that can't happen. It's a week 3 game, and you're supposed to be the home team at a neutral site playing at Lucas Oil in your home state. And you can talk about the crowd. Louisville had more fans there, whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. Like, those are mistakes, whether you're on the road or at home, that you cannot have. And I think in order for them to get back on track, there needs to be a higher standard of play calling. There needs to be a higher standard of communication on the sidelines. They just looked like they kept trying to draw them off sides in the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. Like, there needs to be a certain point in time where the certain game plan that you went in with, you need to adjust, and you need to adjust really well. And that's what I'm going to be looking for, is you're gonna have to hang with the team in the first half, and then how your second half adjustment's going to come out. For me, that's what I think is going to stand out for this team, and that's what they need to work on the next few weeks.
I mean, I think there's just a clear lack of preparation going into these games. I think you spend the week going into practices, watching film, and a big thing they said was that when Taven mentioned, he said that, we tried to watch film, there was stuff we missed, right? But that is a coaching thing. You need to prepare your team to be ready for any game, right? And when you mention how on Thursday they switched a bunch of stuff, that's just not the time to be messing around with the stuff that's already planted in the brain, like, we got to do this. And Taven had mentioned that Jalen Lucas, he was like, I've never looked at him in practice on that play. And that's just mind-blowing, because everyone should be on your radar, right? Again, but that's coaching. Yes, that's player too. You need to be able to read the field while you're out there. But I mean, when you see that Taven's really comfortable in the pocket, right? And he feels comfortable there, but you need to be comfortable all over the field. And I just think it's a lack of preparation as well with, I mean, gosh, talk about when they get to the 1 yard line. I mean, you get to the 1 yard line.
How do you not run a quarterback sneak?
Plenty of times. And I mean, have I ever played football? No, but I felt like I could have got touched on in that moment. I mean, like, you're just confused on, like, where is this play call coming from? Again, it's from the sideline. So it just comes down with coaching stuff. It comes up with a lack of communication. Sometimes in that moment, maybe Taven does need to step up and be like, actually, I'm going to do what's best for this team, despite what's going on the sideline, which could be a game changer.
I think one of the biggest things I've seen that could be a byproduct of why all this is happening is the quarterback battle was still going on in week 2.
Right.
And sure, like, if you're undecided on who the starter is going to be and it's really that tight of a battle, sure. But you have to name a consistent starter by week 1. Like, you have to. Otherwise, there's going to be... You're taking snaps away from the potential starter in practice because they're sharing. Now, all of a sudden, you have Taven being able to take the majority of the snaps in practice because he's named the starter. So it was weird that they sent Sorsby out there against Ohio State, and then Taven comes in, and then Taven started the next 3. You know, it's like, I don't understand. I don't get that.
You know what I would add is, what are they doing all summer when they're practicing?
Right.
Because you've got the players coming in all day, every day, throughout the entire summer, and there's no chance they played equally. That's not a thing.
Right.
I don't know how they couldn't determine it. And all you're doing as the offensive coordinator or Tom Allen is making a setback for whoever's going to be your starting quarterback. That's 1 or 2 less games. You're going to set them back in with less confidence, less experience. These are 2 young quarterbacks with minimal to no experience in college football. And I think that definitely could have jeopardized a lot what we've done so far.
I mean, also you mentioned, Coach Allen had said that he's like, Taven plays better than he practices. I'm just like, what does that mean, though? Like, I don't understand.
You said plays better than he practices?
I've never heard that before.
Okay.
Yeah. So then I'm like, so you're telling me when he's on the field, it's when he shines the best. But in practices, he's not really producing. Like, then how was there even a pick of quarterback from practices? Like, if you're just basing it off play, that's just concerning, because that means that there's something that's still not clicking when there's no pressure from another team, which I think is a problem.
Like, how do you feel confident to, like, throw him as a starting quarterback if that's, like, how you feel about the starting quarterback position with Taven?
Well, I would add that's a red flag on the coaches. If your franchise player is not playing hard enough in practice and that's not reflecting, why is he being automatically chosen to be the starting quarterback? Exactly. I think if any player is shining better in the game than practice, that's definitely a red flag. You look at other NFL quarterbacks. Who was it? Who was that quarterback? Jamarcus Russell, who didn't watch
the Raiders?
Who didn't watch any film, and they sent him the fake.
Oh, Johnny Manziel too.
Yes, they sent him the film, and they asked
pastime Kyler Murray, who was playing Call of Duty.
You know what I'm talking about, though.
Yes.
They sent him the film, and they asked if he watched it because there was nothing on the tapes, and he said, "Yes, I did watch it." It's the same thing as that. They're shining better in the games than in practices.
Yeah.
Which you guys have all mentioned it. You can't have that. You should be. I'm not saying that you should be better in practice than during a game. That's not what I'm saying, because game time is when that's all the lights are on you, and that's when you need to perform. But you should see a development in practice. You should be getting better each and every week. And it seems to me, based on what Allen has said and what has been going on, that is not happening. And I don't know if that's it. We've all talked about it. It's got to be a combo. It's just got to be a combo of things there. And it's, what, week 4 now? Week 5? I forget.
Week 5.
Week 5. Okay.
Wow.
It's flown by.
They're starting the Big Ten grind right now. They've got to figure it out, or it's going to get really ugly.
I agree. I mean, you go into Big Ten games, it's not the time to be guessing anymore. It's not the time for the little kinks, yeah.
And I would look at this upcoming game against Louisville. I don't think there's any ruling out of a win.
You mean Maryland?
Sorry.
No, you're good.
We've been talking so much about Louisville.
No, yeah, facts.
I'm looking at this upcoming game against Maryland, and I wouldn't rule out a win, but Maryland, their offense is very solid. Tagovailoa is a very good passing quarterback, and yes, IU has a good defense, but to what extent can IU outscore Maryland?
Outscore? I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't
think that's going to happen. I think so. Here's my thing. Tagovailoa on the season, he has not had a game where he hasn't thrown for over 220 passing yards.
Insane.
8 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's also rushed for 53 yards and 2 touchdowns. Last year, I was at the game reporting for IUS-TV when Maryland came to the Rock, and I couldn't count the number of times that Tagovailoa just did his little maestro thing and ran like all the way around the field and then made a broken play work for like a big gainer every time. Mm-hmm. Like, he burned them. Let's see. I got to pull. Okay. Last year, 25 for 39, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns. Then he gets hurt.
Right.
So then it's like, okay, you don't want to see a player get hurt. You don't want to see a player go down. We were really glad that he was okay. He was able to finish out a couple games in the season. But then you bring the backup quarterback, Billy Edwards, in there. He doesn't complete a pass. So it's like, okay, they're going to run the ball. But then he proceeds to run the ball for 53 yards and a touchdown on 5 carries. Like, you can't do that. Maryland outrushed Indiana 172-36.
Insane.
And 442, 351 in total yards. So, yeah, it's just like, if you want to have any chance of beating this team, you have to get pressure on Tagovailoa. Mm-hmm. And when you can bring him down, you need to bring him down. Because if you don't, he's going to create a broken play that turns into a big gainer, and IU's going to have problems all day.
I mean, I think it's truly going to come down to the experience of both teams. I mean, IU's a very new team, right? But you see with Maryland, they're not really a new team. I mean, that's a solid offense, a solid defense. I mean, their defense has only allowed 4 offensive touchdowns in the first 4 games. They forced 11 turnovers, including 3 interceptions, 2 fumbles against Michigan State. I mean, the numbers don't lie, guys. Like, It's solid. I mean, their offense is already scoring at least 30 points per game. I mean, and they're holding Michigan State, for example, to a 1-digit score. Like, that's just insane. And I think what worries me is IU struggles offensively. And if you already and you're going against a strong defense, you're already the underdog. IU has to go in knowing they're the underdog, but still coming in like, we're going to give up a fight, right? This isn't going to be a 4 overtime game. Cross our fingers. But I think it's going to come down to experience. I mean, like you guys said, Maryland's quarterback has experience. He's a senior. He's done this before. It's not new to him. You're going to see that he has more experience on the field. You'll be able to see that he'll replays, do those broken plays, like you said, get out of tight situations. That's where Taven kind of struggles. I just think it's going to come down to experience on the field. I mean, first away game, yes, Louisville at Lucas Oil, but first away game, it's going to be huge for IU. They cannot crack under pressure.
To give you a couple more numbers here, and then I'll let you two gentlemen go for it. Maryland leads the Big Ten Conference in total yards with 1,800. They've only given up 3 sacks on the year. Tagovailoa has only been sacked 3 times. That's still somehow 4th in the Big Ten, which I don't understand how. But you mentioned defense, Liv. They lead the conference in interceptions, 7 interceptions, and the rushing yards, the passing yards. You mentioned that too. 10 sacks, that's 7th. But it's the Tagovailoa numbers are just insane. That's what I mentioned. 3 sacks. That's what allows him to extend plays. You have to be able to bring him down and send pressure on him, because if you force him to make a mistake, he'll chuck you one, and you'll get interceptions and you'll get turnovers.
Yeah, you guys nailed everything I was pretty much going to say. Yeah, they average 450.5 yards, which is most in the Big Ten on offense. They're a very pass-heavy offense. As you said, Tagovailoa has only been sacked 3 times, and it's his ability to break away and get out of these situations to get sacked. He's so elusive, and his ability to run and create on these broken plays, as you guys mentioned, it's unreal. And, their turnover margin is at plus 2.3 per game, which is 2nd in the nation. And the only thing that I really see that Maryland's really struggling on is their special teams. They are 5 for 9 on field goals. I mean, and it really hasn't. They haven't had a game where it's like, oh, like we need to depend on these special teams to like keep us in this game because their first 4 games. I mean, they've looked like the dominant team. I mean,
Right.
looking at the Charlotte game that they played earlier, they were down like 14 or something in that game. Ended up coming back and winning. I mean, it's not a really good Charlotte team. I mean, they blew out Michigan State. They blew out Virginia, who's having a really not good year. I mean, same with Michigan State. So, I mean, they really haven't played like one of these top teams. And I'm not saying that I use one of these top teams. But I do think that with Tagovailoa coming in, I think that he'll have a big game. I mean, the offense looks really good. Roman Hemby's also one of those players on that offense. 4 touchdowns this year. I mean, IU's given up a lot of rushing touchdowns. So...
Yeah.
With that pass-heavy offense, it'll be interesting to see how Maryland plays with the run game as well with Hemby in the backfield because I think he's rushed for like 250-plus yards so far.
255, you got it.
And, so it'll be interesting to see how they plan to come into this game knowing that Indiana's given up a lot of rushing touchdowns with that offense. So it'll be interesting to see how they come into with a game plan.
Indiana's defense is 4th in the Big Ten in pass yards allowed, 707, but they're 12th in rush yards allowed, 662. Their their run defense is not good. Like really, really not good.
I mean, I think that's where IU needs to look at though. I mean, like if we see it, we hope they see it because if you see that Maryland really relies heavy on their passes, right? And IU's defense is strong when it comes to that. I mean, 3 interceptions last game, 1 being a pick 6, right? So I mean, that's important. You look for those spots where you really can shine. I'm worried though that if I'm Maryland, I'm like, okay, we're gonna incorporate some QB runs, right?
Yeah.
And that's where IU struggles. I mean, they allowed DJ Irons from Akron to get 140 yards. And it's just like, where? Like, why? And so I feel like, if I'm Maryland, I'm like, okay, they struggle on the QB runs. They get flustered. They don't really know where to go. I'm going to start to hit on that. But if I'm IU, okay, they really rely on the passing. He's going to really chuck it. So we're going to go for those one-on-one coverage and really try to get those interceptions. I think both teams can see those weak points, and I see those highlights of where both can shine. I really think this will be a defensive game, honestly.
Ooh.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
I would just put it together that if IU's defense doesn't shine, Tagovailoa and the offense is going to completely hammer down on IU, and it's not even going to be close.
Because IU's offense can't keep up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to see what IU's defense can really do. Tagovailoa, obviously a top 3 quarterback in the Big Ten. Would like to see some big plays. Really would. I've got Maryland taking this one 24-10.
Ooh, prediction.
Really?
Prediction.
Yeah.
24-10.
Wait, that's
It's
way
been pretty
close.
high scoring the past few times they've played. I mean, the game's been in the 30s, so...
Yeah.
I mean, that does kind of go with your statement about like it being a defensive game. Here's what I'll say before I give my score prediction. I think if Indiana wants a chance to win this game, they're going to have to stop probably the first down run or the second down run, right? They're going to have to force Maryland to throw in long yardage situations, 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 10s, 3rd and 12s. You're going to have to get a few negative plays on the ground to force Tagovailoa to work some magic and keep their drives alive. If they can't do that, and if Maryland's running all over him, that just sets up the play action pass for Tagovailoa perfectly. And we know his passing ability. He's just going to pick the defense apart. I still just don't have the confidence in them yet. They haven't proved anything to me yet on stopping the run effectively. So I think it's going to be a loss for IU. I'm going to give Maryland the dub. We'll say I'll go 28-17.
Okay.
I like that. I'll make this one short and quick. I think that with Maryland, I think they'll end up winning 38-27.
Okay.
I like it.
I think I'm going to go ahead and go Maryland's going to take the win. And I'm going to go ahead and do 34-14.
Oh, wow. Oh, man.
I am. Only because I really don't see them. I really don't see IU being the ones that takes them below 30 points. I hope so. I mean, if IU really get this win, I just think it's going to be a learning game for IU. And I think even if they lose this game, if they show improvement, I feel like there's high hopes, regardless of a loss, really.
And you know what I'm looking at also is there's back-to-back road games for the conference games for IU.
Right.
And how big it could be if IU could take this versus Maryland going into the Michigan game, because you're also going to consider IU's next home game is Rutgers over homecoming weekend. it's going to be a sold-out crowd. Rutgers is a great team. I think it would be huge if IU can take it over Maryland.
I mean, I want to point out, too, is their next 3 games, all 3 quarterbacks are insanely strong, right? I mean, you have Maryland's, you have Michigan, you have Rutgers. Gavin Wimsatt has been killing it as quarterback, right? And he's young. And so I think you see 3 teams with strong quarterbacks at this point. It's going to be a QB battle, and I'm so excited.
I do want to sprinkle this in real quick, too, to kind of just talk about it. I talked about the time of possession in the Akron game for IU. 34 minutes, 24 seconds for Akron. 25 minutes, 36 seconds for IU. In the Maryland game last year, 34 minutes and 44 seconds time of possession. IU, 25 minutes, 16 seconds. So in these games where we can talk about the Michigan game, too. Like, in these games where you're going to be outgunned and outmatched in positions, probably outranked because – I'm just going to say it right now. Michigan's my pick to win the national championship. That can be a controversial take or not. But that's my take. That's my take. I'll live and die on that sword, on that hill. But in these games where you are outmatched in so many different areas, you have to control time of possession. You have to keep the offense on the field, and you have to eat away at that clock and score. Long drives, long possessions that end in scores. And with the way we've seen IU's offense play so far this season, the past couple seasons, like last year they ran hurry up after every play. And in clear situations where you need to slow the game down. And in these games, if they can't slow the game down, they're not going to win.
I mean, I think you saw it also in the Akron game. Time was against them. I think that they let Akron get to the point where they could have won on that field goal. And I mean, like you just said, when you as a coach are seeing this happen, you're like, okay, we are now leaving them with the potential to get the last score. That isn't acceptable. And I think in those moments, that's when you need to slow down, give Jalen Lucas the ball, and let him run for a certain amount of yards, get those first downs. But that isn't the moment where you chuck it to Cam Camper 40 yards down the field. Like, that's just not the moment. I think we're still trying to look for these big plays, but in moments like that, slow the game down. Take possession of the ball and make it so other teams don't have the opportunity for them to win at the end of the game. Yep, that's how I feel.
And then just going back to this Rutgers game, I'm looking at the Rutgers schedule. They're still on non-conference. They play Wagner this week, so I would say that's an automatic victory for them. Yes. That puts them at 4-1. Then they've got a difficult matchup in Wisconsin. So they're either entering the IU game 4-2 or 5-1. They're gonna have momentum coming into this. But I would also look at it, they really haven't had much competition outside of Michigan so far. Right. I don't know if their record and their stats really depict their true value. I think it could be a lot lower than what it's looking like right now. But just briefly looking ahead, what do you guys think of that game for IU versus Rutgers?
I mean, I like that game. I think that's gonna be such a good game. I think for it to just be, homecoming's live. Energy's going to be there. Homecoming's always fun anyway. But I want to say that I feel like Rutgers and IU are kind of similar in team. I feel like both quarterbacks are young, right? But I think that neither of them have really, put their mark, right, on this team. I think they're both trying to get in that leadership role. I think both offense is super strong. I see defensively, of course, Rutgers is really strong. And they both have, this really good culture under their teams that really make it a fun game, right? Both fan bases are super intense. I think it's just going to come down to the energy. IU definitely has the upper hand, it being a Memorial Stadium, of course. But I think that can really be, honestly, a game that IU can win. I think it's going to be so important for them to win it, too.
The Rutgers game, that'll be an interesting one. As you said, Dylan, homecoming, it's going to be packed. Memorial Stadium will be packed on that day. But looking at you said they played Rutgers before or Michigan before,
right?
Rutgers.
Yes, correct.
That'll be interesting to see. Well, no, yeah, because Rutgers played Michigan last weekend, and they kept it tight for the first half. It was 14-7.
They scored right on that first drive, right?
7-0. They had momentum, and then Michigan just kind of does what Michigan does. They kind of come back in games. I honestly don't. Sorry, Riley. I don't think that Michigan will win at all.
That's okay, man.
They've struggled. Okay. I think Michigan struggled against these really bottom tier teams. J.J. McCarthy hasn't looked his best, but that's besides the point. It'll be interesting to see, how Indiana goes up against them in the Big House. Looking at Rutgers, Rutgers kind of held it tight for a little bit until Michigan, their defense kind of turned it up.
Right.
And kind of interception, pick six. It was just kind of, all right, game over. But yeah, looking at the IU Rutgers game in a few weeks, that'll be a good one, I think. It'd be a good test for IU and that offense to go against a good Rutgers defense. So, I mean, we'll see how that one goes.
So, there is, in my opinion, there is a path for them to either be 500 or 5-7. There is a path. There's a way. There's a way. And I might sound crazy to some people saying that, but like I said, you're going to lose the Maryland game. I'm looking at the Michigan game as, a measuring stick. How close can they keep it? Michigan matches up against Indiana very well. Because
I'm looking at the Michigan game. Don't get embarrassed and don't scare the fan base off.
Well, it's that, and it's like, keep everybody healthy. That's a big thing right there. Michigan matches up against Indiana very well because they are a run-first team, and Michigan, in my opinion, has one of the best, if not the best, rushing attacks in the country.
Go ahead and tell them.
Going against Indiana like that game, I'm looking at it as, that's blowout territory, but keep it close as possible, and keep everybody healthy because you're right. Coming into that Rutgers game, you got the bye week in between the Maryland and Michigan game. You go to Rutgers. You got to win that game because then you turn right back around and you go to Happy Valley against Penn State. And Penn State's good. They are really, really good. And then you go home against Wisconsin. This is a game where you're really going to have to feed off the crowd. This is going to be the biggest crowd that they've seen this year and probably that they're going to have this year, maybe against Sparty in November, but this is a game that you're going to feed off the crowd, keep everybody healthy through these next 3 weeks, go into Rutgers with a good game plan, and the Hoosiers can 100% get this done. They can win against Rutgers.
I would also toss this out from a different angle, not looking at player performance. Yes, this is going to be a packed game, probably sold out. There's going to be a lot of potential recruits at this game. And I think IU's performance really will be a factor on who we could get for upcoming seasons. I think this game is very crucial. Very crucial.
IU recruits, if you're at that Akron game, go ahead and spin the block one more time.
Give them a chance.
Go ahead.
One more chance, please.
I promise energy will be good. I'm going to let you know now. That's just me giving a shout out to the newbies.
All right, that's what we've got for this week on the Pack the Rock podcast. It's IU taking on Maryland this Saturday at 3:30 p.m. We'll be here next week to talk more about it. Pack the Rock podcast. Thank you.